The lava front reached Copper Lane at 3:17, and Cale Morrow was already moving before the ground temperature sensor on his left boot finished screaming at him. He had been 3 blocks north when the street grid monitors lit, a single red pulse that meant the magmatic intrusion had broken through the storm drain tunnels and was pooling on the surface. The compact's emergency coordinator, a narrow-shouldered Velhari administrator named Sav Elath, had transmitted the non-respondable designation 12 minutes earlier. The lower quarter of Veth's 3rd district, 6 residential streets, a covered market, and the tunnel interchange connecting them to the Eastern Shelter Network, had been written off as untenable. Elath had transmitted it calmly, in the measured cadence of someone who had run the numbers, and arrived at a door they were not willing to open. Cale had read the transmission while jogging. He had not stopped jogging. He was 21 years old, 14 months with Earth Aid Station's Urban Rescue Division, 6 of them on Velhari 3. Long enough to learn the city's street grid by feel. Long enough to know that the stone and copper buildings of the lower quarter had internal stairwells that funneled heat upward and left ground floor rooms survivable longer than outside temperatures suggested. Long enough to know that the Velhari urban caste, copper-skinned, broad through the chest, evolved for the mild thermal tolerance of an equatorial volcanic zone, had buildings designed to absorb heat slowly. Not magma on the street front slowly, but slowly enough. Long enough to know the non-respondable designation was wrong. Copper Lane came into view at the base of the slope. The flow had come up through the storm drain grates and was moving in a broad, slow sheet across the lower half of the street, orange-white at its leading edge and cooling to dull red-black where it pooled against the building walls. The EAS thermal suit could handle sustained ambient temperatures up to 380 degrees Celsius for 45 minutes. The surface temperature of the flow itself was somewhere above 900. He was not going to walk through the flow. He was going to find where it wasn't. His partner, Finn Adara, came on comms from the crawler at the top of the slope. "Cale, the cordon is set at the top of the grade. Elath's people have it blocked." "I'm not at the top of the grade," Cale said. A pause. "I can see that." "Any contact from inside?" Building monitors on the north side of Copper Lane are still active. EAS grid is reading thermal signatures inside the upper floors of numbers 7 through 11. Count is unclear. The intrusion heat is washing out the lower building reads. 7 through 11 was the north row of the lane's residential block, 5 buildings, all 4 stories, all built in the Velhari tradition of thick copper alloy-reinforced stone that absorbed heat like a battery. The signatures in the upper floors meant people had done exactly what Cale expected. When the street-level heat became untenable, they had gone up. They were alive, in buildings acting as heat sinks, and the heat sinks were filling. "Status of the lateral cut-through," Cale said. "The service alley between numbers 6 and 7. Fenn checked the grid overlay, showing clear on the west side. The flow came up through the central grates, tracking east from there. The service alley on the west side might be passable." "Might be," Cale said. "Cale, I'm going to look at it," he said, and went left. The service alley was 1.5 meters wide, stone-walled, roofed by the overhanging upper stories of 6 and 7. Ground temperature, 290 Celsius, hot enough to warrant full thermal protection, not hot enough to be impassable. The grating at the midpoint was intact. The flow was coming through the street grates further east. Cale walked it. He walked it at the pace of someone reading a surface, not running it, because running told him nothing and falling ended everything. The alley opened into the back court of number 7, a recessed ground floor entryway, stone-arched, 300 years old. The arch had absorbed heat but was structurally intact. The door behind it was sealed. Cale knocked with the heel of his gauntlet 3 times, which was the Velhari convention for a door you intended to open. The door opened. The Velhari inside, a female, middle-aged, with the wide copper-banded forehead of the district's long-resident families, stared at him from above a face wrap she had pulled up against the heat. Her eyes carried the expression of someone who had stopped expecting help to arrive and was looking at the proof that they were wrong. "There are 14 of us," she said in Velhari, the translator patch on Kale's collar rendering it into flat standard. "On the second floor. We could not reach the tunnel interchange." "You don't need the tunnel interchange," Kale said. "The service alley on your western wall is passable right now. How many can move without assistance?" She turned back into the building without answering, not a refusal, efficiency. He followed her inside. 14 people on the second floor, 11 adults, 2 children, 1 elderly male with burns on both lower arms from the street heat. Burns serious but survivable. He was going to need help over the thermal ridge that had formed in the alley floor, knee-high, awkward. 11 adults could manage themselves and the children. Kale could carry the elderly male and talk them through the alley at the same time. "Single file," he said. "Center of the alley away from both walls. Don't touch the stone. Walk, don't run. If someone ahead of you stops, stop, don't push." He said it without raising his voice. Panic in a single-file column in a hot alley was a compounding problem. The 14 Velhari arranged themselves without further direction. The woman who had opened the door went first, children in the middle, elderly male near the end. Kale fell in behind him. 4 minutes through the alley. The thermal ridge required Kale to lift the elderly male over it, which the elderly male did not entirely approve of, but accepted with the pragmatism of someone who had run out of alternatives. On the far side, Kale set him down and they covered the rest at a fast walk. Fen Adara had the crawler back to the alley mouth by the time the first Velhari emerged. She counted heads as they loaded, touching each one on the shoulder, her form of focus. 14, she said when the last one cleared. 14, Kale confirmed. "The north side has more, I need to go back." "The flow is spreading, the alley temperature is climbing." "I know. Eleth's cordon team is watching from the top of the grade." Kale looked up the slope. 3 compact municipal officers had moved to the edge of their barrier line and were watching with the flat, still posture Velhari used when encountering something they had no category for. The officer in the center held a communicator and was not using it. She was just watching. Kale went back into the alley. The second building, number 8, was accessed through a maintenance cut-through running between the inner courts, wide enough for 2 side-by-side, built for equipment transit. Ground temperature 15 degrees higher than the first pass. The flow under the grating was moving east. Kale moved faster. Number 8 had 9 people. Same route out, single file, thermal ridge, Kale at the back. One of them, a Velhari male who had sheltered on the 3rd floor, had come down too fast when he heard movement in the court, mild heat exposure, disoriented. Kale kept a hand on his shoulder the full length of the alley. The hand was partly guidance, and partly the kind of contact that orients a person when their senses have started giving them wrong information. The 3rd run was harder. Number 9's access route was further in, and the ground temperature had climbed to 340 by the time Kale reached the back court. The building door was already open. A Velhari teenager, perhaps 15, standing in the doorway with a face wrap beginning to char at one corner and the look of someone who had spent 40 minutes waiting for a door to open in the world. He stared at Kale the way people stare at something they had stopped believing was coming. "How many?" Kale said. 7, the teenager said. "My grandmother cannot walk the stairs." "Show me which floor." The grandmother was on the 2nd floor, a Velhari elder with the deep copper-black patina of extreme age, seated in the building's formal receiving room in a chair that was clearly the building's best furniture and clearly where she had decided she would wait. Hands folded in her lap, face wrap on. She looked at Kale with the equanimity of someone who had decided this was where the story ended and was surprised to find that it hadn't. "I am heavy," she said, via the translator patch. "I've carried heavier," Kale said and meant it. He carried her down on his back, her arms around his shoulders, her legs over his forearms, fastest configuration for a tight stairwell. She said nothing during the descent and nothing through the alley transit, only tightening her grip at the thermal ridge when his footing shifted, which he registered and adjusted for. 7 from number 9. 9 from number 10, complicated backcourt access, maintenance door warped shut by heat, Kale using the suit's pry bar to clear it. 5 from number 11, the last building on the north row. The fifth run brought him out of the alley just before 500, 2 hours and 43 minutes after he had first walked into it. Ground temperature at the alley mouth, 391 degrees and climbing. On the last transit, he had felt heat through the suit's boots at the sole contact points, the suit's way of telling him the margin was closing. He had made the final transit in 2 minutes flat. Fenn counted 35 off the fifth run, touching each one on the shoulder, and the second count matched the first. The cordon team at the top of the grade had grown. The original 3 had been joined by 6 more, and a compact regional vehicle had arrived behind the barrier line. Sav Eleth was standing beside it. Kale walked up the slope. He was tired in the way that followed sustained exertion past the point where the body stops registering it and simply runs on having started. Suit ambient log, mean 327 degrees across 5 transits. Water reservoir empty. A contact burn on his right forearm where the wrist seal had compressed on the carry. He reached the barrier. Eleth was watching him with the Velhari open iris expression. No clean standard translation. Something between recognition and encountering a category that did not yet have a name. 35, Kale said, plus the 14 from the first run. The north row is cleared. I didn't reach the south row. The flow covered the access by the second run. Eleth said nothing for a moment. The copper-banded forehead was very still. The designation was non-respondable, she said. I know, Kale said. A pause. Behind Eleth, the cordon team stood without moving. The south row, Eleth said, 12 buildings. I know, the south row is gone. I couldn't reach them. What he did not say, the south row had thermal signatures on the grid too. He had seen them. He had gone north first because the north row's backcourt access was partially passable, and the south row's was not, and he had made the right call, and the right call still left 12 buildings with people in them. The best call available was not the same as a good outcome. He did not say any of this. He stood at the barrier and waited. Eleth looked at him for a long time. Then she turned and spoke to the cordon team in Velhari deep-voweled district dialect, not the administrative standard of the non-respondable transmission. The translator patch gave Kale the surface rendering, processing the rescued residents, shelter network contact for the 49 incoming, building authority coordination on South Row documentation. But that was not what she had said first. Before the coordination instructions, she had said something in the deepest register of the district dialect, 5 words, short and final, that the translator patch rendered as a gap, a bracketed question mark, because the phrase had no standard equivalent. The Velhari around Kale heard it, and the shift that followed was not a change in posture but in something less visible, a collective reorientation toward what he was, not what he was doing. He did not ask what the 5 words meant. Fenn handed him a water pack and he drank it, watching the 49 Velhari move toward the transports. The children were holding the hands of adults who were not their parents, because that was what had happened in the alley. The grandmother from the formal receiving room was seated on the back step of the nearest transport, folded hands, composure intact, except that she was looking at Kale across the width of the staging area with the same open iris expression Eleth had used, and she did not look away. The district thermal grid showed the south row going dark at 5:23, 1 building at a time. Kale watched it. He finished the water pack and did not reach for another, because there was nothing useful in that direction, and his orientation toward useful things was the thing that had gotten 49 people out of an alley in the dark. Later, when the incident report was filed, there would be a note attached, not in standard, not rendered by any translation system in the Compact's registry, because the phrase had no equivalent. It was the same 5 words Eleth had spoken at the barrier. Cale's incident supervisor flagged the untranslated attachment 3 days later and sent it to the EAS language team with a query. The response came back in 4 words: "Do not translate it, keep it." They did,